Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, and I think it's about time. The game is coming very, very soon that we talked about all aspects of BfA and what I think about them going into this, because it's been made quite public. Any negativity that I put out has certainly been met with people creating threads all over the internet and stuff, but we've also done a number of positive things which don't cause drama, right? So those are the things that don't really get mentioned very much. And as we are in the closing stages of Battle for Azeroth, we're now testing the Raid Finder. It looks for the most part like classes are kind of finished for what we know. I think it's about time we talk about it, as we've spent a number of weeks now at level 120 with a capped character, exploring the world and doing everything we can possibly do in BfA, that we have an idea of what it is we're going to be getting into. So it's going to be a number of subjects here, so I'll break it down into nice simple chunks as best I can, all right? So first of all, the leveling experience. So I was quite outspoken about the leveling experience, mainly the Horde versus the Alliance. For me, the Horde Zones, even now, I've been back, they've revamped a bit, and currently most of the world is actually very, very bugged, but the content is there. You just have to deal with some very irritating things in order to actually do some leveling. I would say that still the Horde Zones of Nazmir and Zuldazar are fantastic, but they did make a misstep with Vol'dun and made a relatively weak zone there. On the Alliance side, they still had the very weak zones, in my opinion, of Drusvar and Borealis, with actually making a solid zone in Stormsong Valley. So overall, the leveling experience is really good. And I would say that the best story for me that's going to play out through the expansion is actually the Alliance zones, particularly the Ash Vein, and how that's going to play out. The idea of two matriarchs going head-to-head without getting spoilerific. That story really intrigues me. That story really intrigues me. It's just the gameplay, right? Because that's in the Borealis zone. It's the gameplay in those zones that let me down. I think they've done a good job. I think the zones are not a maze. I've seen people concerned about this because, of course, we won't have flying at the start of BfA. They're not a maze. They're relatively open. And they work quite well cross-faction as well. Because, as we know, endgame, you're going to have the Horde entering Kul Tiras, and you're going to have the Alliance coming over to Zuldazar. And the way they've done that so that both the factions can mingle around in there, even if you're not using war mode, which we'll talk about shortly, which enables PvP, you're not going to get lost without having a flying mount. A couple of zones are trickier than others. I would say Vol'dun is a little trickier, but otherwise, navigating the zones is fine. The gameplay is decent for the most part. It's like 50-50 on whether you're going to have a fun, interesting zone with a good story, or whether you're going to get a decent enough story with some wonky gameplay that makes some missteps along the way that don't make a lot of sense or are a little bit boring, and then you're kind of like, ugh. But overall, for a leveling experience, I think it's pretty good. I like the way that, in fact, you only need to do 2 zones. If you're just looking to cap a character, you can do 2 zones, and with war mode, it's even less that you can actually do in order to get capped. You have no reason whatsoever, unless you're going for Lore Master and you eventually want to unlock flying, and you may only want to do that on one character, so you have it for your whole account, that you have to do all of the zones for your faction. In fact, you can do very, very little and have a capped character. So I think for people who don't enjoy leveling at all, regardless of whether I think it's good content or not, are going to be pretty happy with that. Is that I don't actually have to spend much time here, although you probably will want to ultimately to get that flying unlocked. So for a leveling experience, pretty decent. Let's talk about the heart of Azeroth, in comparison certainly to Legion artifact weapons. So as you know, when Legion started, the first thing you do is you get your artifact weapon, and in fact you can unlock them for all your specs, and then you go on your merry way while steadily beginning your initial progress of your artifact weapon. You'll pick up some quite reasonable relics to stick in there, and then you're going to start gaining the early traits very quickly while you're leveling, gaining power, gaining strength. Those are the kind of things that you experience in Legion. Very different in Battle for Azeroth. Firstly, you're going to be unlocking the Heart of Azeroth, which is just a necklace, just a stat stick that has no real interplay at all. You can't do anything with it. It will naturally absorb, which is a great quality of life change. You'll naturally absorb artifact power. If you gain any, you don't get an item to click or anything like that. It's just instantly given to your necklace because your necklace works for all of your specs. It's just simply something that levels up. It's about as plain and mundane as you could possibly get, but that's okay. That's okay. It serves its purpose as an individual character's strengths. It would be nice if it was a little bit more interactive, because of course we're going to be comparing it to the artifact weapons, which had an entire talent tree of stuff to look forward to, and you could pick a path that you were going to get. That stuff is gone. That's a little bit of a letdown, but in terms of quality of life, of not having your bags full of artifact power items and things like that, and having to stand and spam and eventually fill up and just be like click, 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 click. That stuff being gone is a great change. A mix would have been nice. A mix would have been nice if you could have tailored your character in some way. Which I suppose brings us on to the Azurite armor. So, as we know, in Battle for Azeroth, you've lost raid tier sets, you've lost artifact weapons, you've lost legendaries. That's a huge amount of bonuses for your character which are not present in Battle for Azeroth. And some of them were very important to gameplay. As we well know, some people are utterly distraught with the way their classes play after losing not only your base artifact ability, but also the traits that travel through the artifact weapon that modified your spells in some way or gave you some extra bonuses, and also then legendaries and the effects that those had of being gone. All that stuff is missing. And of course, Nether Crucible as well has to be mentioned here as a feature of Legion, which is no longer present in Battle for Azeroth. All these little tweaks and add-ons and bonuses that you were picking up along the way, all of them are gone and are replaced by the Azurite armor. Now, we were very dubious. I was very skeptical about the Azurite armor, as it was losing, you know, you're comparing it to raid tier sets, you're comparing it to class-modifying legendaries, because this is the system. This is what they've come up with to replace all that. Yes, it is fair to compare it to those, because this is what it's designed to do. In Blizzard's own words, it was designed to fill the gaps. Fill the gaps in the classes. That's what it was designed to do. Does it do that? No. No, it does not do that. Which is disappointing. It is disappointing. It doesn't do that. What we did eventually get, and we have seen now Azurite traits across the board besides the one from raids. Okay, they have yet to reveal what the raid Azurite armor bonuses will be. So they've been redesigned, so they are essentially the Nether Crucible. That's the system they've gone with, is you have 3 tiers. Eventually you'll have more tiers of these concentric rings where you pick a bonus. Now, in order to get your Azurite armor bonuses, your Heart of Azeroth, your necklace, needs to be of a certain level. So while you're leveling, it might require Heart of Azeroth level 1 to get your first major trait. And then at level 3, you'll get the second one, and then at level 5, you might get the final one. Now, so far, all the Azurite armor works exactly the same way. The main bonus, the thing that actually increases your damage, your healing, your tanking, the one that's important to you is the lowest. Okay, so think of the Nether Crucible flipped upside down. The bigger bonus that you want is actually the first tier. So you require the lowest Heart of Azeroth level in order to get the biggest bonus. From there, you'll gain a minor trait secondarily when you reach your second level of your Azurite armor, which is usually a defensive. And then the final big reward for unlocking all your Azurite armor traits on that particular piece of armor is going to be item level. Again, just flip over your Nether Crucible, you'll get the idea. So what are the traits we've seen? So there are some interesting ones. There's no doubt about that. Some that actually affect gameplay. So, for example, on my mage, I have an Azurite trait that gives me a proc. Okay, I was surprised to see that. On the initial impression of Azurite armor, it looked like it was going to be basically just Nether Crucible stuff, which would be passive effects that you couldn't do anything with. It would be stuff like your Frostbolt does extra damage. And that's it. No matter what class you play, just apply a spell and just say it does extra damage, or it will have a chance to do something else. And you can't control it, you can't do anything with it. It's just going to be there, and that would have been a very, very, very poor substitute for an artifact weapon, and of course for legendary stuff, right? That would have been a very, very poor substitute, is just to have these passive fireworks going off that you can't do anything with, and you just have them, you just have these static power gains. So I do have some stuff that gives me procs. Is it exciting stuff? Not particularly, but it is something that you want to manage, right? That's okay. That's something that says, okay, I got a piece of armor that actually does something, and I can have some sort of interaction with that. It makes me feel like I actually gained something. Because, of course, the problem with passive stuff is you can't tell whether you have it or not. Your damage meter might be slightly higher, but because you have no control over it, it's just kind of passively doing its thing. You don't even know if it's good or bad unless you're breaking down into the mathematics of it. You've no no idea. So having procs and things that you can go, oh, there's my Azurite armor doing something, right? That's it. It's actually doing something. I've equipped something that's actually having an effect. That's decent. That's something we can hope for. Are they interesting effects? Well, one of mine is to hard cast Flurry, which is a spell that's usually instant cast. That's it. For those of you who don't play a mage, that's all it is. One of my spells that's usually instant cast, I can hard cast it and it'll do slightly more damage. Exciting? No. You know, it's not particularly exciting, but it is what it is. It's not going to call down a comet like one of my Legos does, right? It's not going to do anything like that or give me double bloodlust, which is a far more interesting interaction, although I can't say I'm sad to see that go, but it is something that I'm aware exists for the most part. But that is kind of the only one. Other than that, there are a couple of procs. Some of the old legendary procs, like Fury Warriors, have stuff built in to their Azurite armor that make things more interesting. And I kind of still believe, because Blizzard kind of hinted at this a while ago, is that the raid tier stuff, the stuff you get from raids, will have significantly more management traits in there, things that you have to deal with properly in order to get the best effect, because in a realistic world, that's where it should matter most. If you're in the open world, which I think is a good idea, I'm not slating the Azurite armor particularly here, if you're in the open world and you're doing sort of leveling, you're doing questing, you're doing a lot of world quests, you're farming mogs, you're doing things like that, the chances are you don't particularly want some complex management of procs, right? In order to do that, you kind of just want to get in there, get the job done, and get on with your day. And therefore, passives, and obviously, if you're doing a lot of stop-start gameplay in terms of world quests, things like you go in, you kill stuff, and then you have a break, and then you go as you travel to the next area, and then you carry on. It makes a lot of sense to have that going on, to have passive effects that aren't managed and things like that. So I'm okay with that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the raid tier says. I will note still, however, that the similar to the artifact weapons is very quickly, around about level 10, your Heart of Azeroth, in order to level it up to the next level, drops off significantly. So you'll only need a little bit of artifact power to get like level 1s, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you start seeing it slowing down around 7. And then around level 8, you're going to have to start adding some grind to this. You're going to have to add some world quest grinding, you're going to have to add some island expeditions, things like that, in order to start getting those levels up. And I will note that still, as of today, the base trait for, say, heroic quality items that you'll get from heroic dungeons is still level 12. Now, this shouldn't be a problem on a main character that's actively being played as you'll pick these up, but I do have two serious concerns here. One, what does this mean for alts? Are you going to really wait a while before we have a catch-up system in place for alts? Otherwise, alts are going to have to, if you have even one alt, you're going to have to start hitting the grind AP treadmill very quickly in order to accommodate things like from mythic dungeons, right? Because you're the minimum amount of AP in order to get your traits going, because you can equip this armor even without the traits active. So you will just have a pair of shoulders, for example, that just do intellect and stamina. And that's it. They don't do anything else because you don't have the Heart of Azeroth level high enough in order to actually activate them. Now, as I did say, you need the minimum to get the best bonus. You do need the minimum. But if this continues on a sort of linear scale, what we might find is that raid tier stuff is quite out of reach while we've already got it. And that's a weird place to be. And again, in respect to alts, this could be a very strange system, is where you'll have alt characters running around in high item level gear, because of course the Azeroth armor does come with an item level, but doesn't have the reason it's powerful actually activated, and maybe not for quite some time. So I'm a little concerned as to how that's going to play out in the end game, because right now it's certainly a grind to start getting your extra levels. To give you an example, a world quest might give you 400 AP, right? A good one might give you 400 to 500 AP. That's a good, solid, elite world quest. In order for me to get level 11 on one of my characters, I need 20,000 artifact power. So if I was to grind it out, sure, it's not that bad, right? If I'm grinding, it's fine. But if I'm just getting another character up to snuff, that's going to be a little bit of a pisser, right? That's going to be a bit of a pisser, and that's only heroic dungeon level stuff. So really interested to see how they're going to play that out, and whether it's going to be decent enough. Let's talk about world questing for a minute then. So very quickly, when you hit 120, you're going to be doing your war campaign, and you're also going to unlock your world quests. This is where there's an interesting moment here. So, I think most of us, at least I would say generally most, right, I guess, don't like the Legion Legendary system, and particularly did not like it at the start of Legion, where you were after the best ones, because they weren't balanced properly, which is pretty standard, and we set about trying to do as much content as possible to get to get our Legendaries. World Quests were a big part of that, and then of course Mythic Plus when that started to evaporate, right, when you've done all your World Quests and turned them in. In response to that, Blizzard did the Emissary Quest system, right? So we had World Quests, which were a great change for Legion, and then the Emissary Quest came along with it. And at the end of it, even if you didn't need that zone, and remember that, even if you didn't need that Emissary Quest, you would get a chest which would still have a Legendary in it. So if we were to take that system out, which is what's happened because the Legendary system is gone, you've got to remember both of these systems went hand in hand. The World Quest and Emissary Quest system goes hand in hand with the Legendary system. I'm sure there are many of you right now still doing your Emissary Quests, not for anything more than a chance at a Legendary, because we know they had a decent chance here, right? Most of us got our Legendaries from Emissary Quest in the early days. Without the Legendary system, and again, I don't support the Legendary system, but taking one half of the system away and leaving the other half, that creates a pretty obvious problem when you do your first World Quest, and you guys are going to run into that very quickly, is that you'll go and do the Emissary Quest, which still exists, but the rewards aren't quite as enticing anymore. To put it in perspective, let's say you're looking for gear from World Quest. It took me 2 evenings, I'm not talking 2 days, 2 evenings of running some dungeons with friends to completely outgear the World Quest gearing system, even with it scaling up. So it does scale up like it does in Legion. So if you have a lower item level, you'll get slightly better rewards from World Quests. As your item level gets higher, you'll get better item level rewards, and then it'll sort of taper off once you reach a certain level. It did only take me 2 evenings to get past, say, the heroic dungeon level, and then into the mythic dungeon level to nullify gear rewards. What does that leave us with in BFA? To stuff to get from Emissary Quest? Well, right now, it's the usual. It's AP, gold. And then on top of that, you might have some pet charms, and that's kind of about it. That's kind of about it. I have no doubt they will add some sort of resource. There are a couple of resources that only drop in raids, like Sanguicells and Hydra Cores, which you can get, these reagents. I'm sure they'll add them, but at the moment, the World Quest system is actually a little bit dire. It's a little bit dire because there's simply not enough reward here. If I look at some of my zones currently in BFA, as I look at the map, of the 6 World Quests in a zone, 4 of them are gold. And not a lot, like 100 gold. If I mouse over here, looking at 79 gold, 110 gold, 81 gold. And the other 3 are AP. 350 AP, 200 AP, and 200 AP. And that's it. That's it. Now, in the early days, what does this mean then? What does this translate to? In the early days, it won't matter too much. Every scrap of AP is going to matter. Every single little drop of it is going to matter. And also, you'll be building up your reputation with the various zones. So that rep grind, which I'm sure many of you will remember from doing early Legion in order to get, Exalted High Mountain and so on and so forth. And certainly if you want the allied races, you're going to be bashing these out regardless. Doesn't matter. My concern is what happens after that. Yeah, I do have concerns there, because if you don't have something like the Legendary system, keeping that system rolling and keeping the treads moving on that, you're very quickly going to run into a wall here, because you're like, well, literally nothing I want from here is of relevance, besides maybe artifact power going forward. And are we going to be in a system which is, it's purely AP based? It's purely AP based. And considering some of the armor already goes up to like Heart of Azeroth levels 18 and beyond, it's like 20 for some mythic dungeon items. You're going to be grinding that out, and is that it? Is that the end game for the most part? So you might say, well, we've got island expeditions. Yes, your island expeditions are fun. They are fun. They've got the new zones up. We've tried them out again. They're very fun. They are very fun, but they will run their course very quickly, similar to scenarios. There will be a point where it's like, it's not that fun. It's not that fun. And those are your main sources of AP. Of course, no gear coming from there. And not only that, they will be tapered by having sort of a weekly to go and do a weekly island expedition to get get the most benefit out of it for those people who don't have a lot of time. And after that, the amount of AP rewards you'll get from that will taper off rather quickly in order to make it not just a grind fest. They're not trying to turn that into just a spammable, more of Soul-style content like we had in Legion. Similar with the Warfronts. The Warfronts are existing. Now, I will be honest, I've not done them. They've always been at a super inconvenient time for me, so I've had to base this off, obviously, everybody else who's done them, from my guild and my friends, and we've had lots of feedback on them, is they are a once-a-week thing, similar to what we had in Tol Barad, is you have this once-a-week thing that you'll go and do, and that's about it. You're not really going to do it again, because the rewards won't be there for you to do it. So what does that... That just means that we have maybe... maybe only a Warlords of... I don't want to say it, but a Warlords of Draenor style, where we're kind of going to run out of content that feels worthwhile within a couple of weeks, because once you hit this wall with AP, world quests will matter less and less and less. Of course, there'll be several people who'll grind them out anyway. I'll probably be one of them if I'm raiding. It's like, I need every speck of AP I can get. Is you'll very quickly start going to dry up here, because you won't have some back-end system like the Lego system. And again, it's not like I enjoy the Lego system, but without it, a lot of this stuff doesn't really make much sense. That's the point I'm trying to get across to you, is there's no equivalent drive to do lesser content in order to keep that stuff flowing. Once you kind of run its course, it's like, do I really want to spend my day on a day-to-day basis going around and collecting 200 gold? Probably not, right? And if my AP, my Heart of Azeroth is at, I don't know, getting upwards of like 100,000 AP, is the 250 going to send me on a 10 or 20 minute journey in order to pick that up? That's a question you have to answer for yourselves. Let's talk about the war campaign then. So class hall quests are gone. Yeah, class hall quests are gone now, and they've been replaced by the war campaign. So the war campaign is kind of cool in some areas. Instead of, it's a much simpler system for them to design, which I saw some of you will see as lazy, but I don't think they've done a lazy job here. The war campaign, the whole purpose of it in the early stages, of course it will advance later in the expansion, is to allow the Horde to get into the Alliance zones and the Alliance to get into the Horde zones and expand on that story in order to motivate this Horde versus Alliance war. That's the war campaign in a nutshell. That's what it's designed to do. What are the rewards of it? Well, gameplay-wise, very cool. I don't want to spoil it because there are some really cool little gameplay elements here, some set scenarios that you'll be taking part in. Some of them that we did on stream that made some players feel a little uncomfortable, actually. So... maybe they've done a good job there, maybe not, depending on your personal tendencies. I'll leave it to that. But the overall gameplay of it, besides the scenarios, which was kind of similar to the class hall stuff, but there's less of them. The main purpose is to open flight points in the other zones. So if you're the Horde, the main purpose of your war campaign is going to be doing follower missions. The follower board does return, and sending them out to unlock outposts. So you'll do a follower mission saying outpost in Drusvar, then you'll have to wait for the follower mission to complete, then you'll get a quest to go to it'll be like, okay, we've discovered another potential outpost in Drusvar, let's go and get it. So then you'll head over to Drusvar, you'll get there, you'll open the outpost, and there you go, you've got a new flight point in that zone. So a lot of the war campaign is just unlocking flight points in the enemy territory. Getting a foothold if you want to RP it a little bit and make it a bit more interesting. Sure, you're gaining a foothold. That's what you're going to be doing. But for the most part, it's just getting your flight points, which will overall make your world questing a bit easier, which ties into what we just spoke about earlier. I have no real point in preferencing either way, class hall stuff or this. I do miss the class halls because obviously you had this sanctuary that you could go back to that was very themed to your character. I think that was awesome. It would have been nice if they just stayed. I don't think there was any reason to get rid of the class halls. They could have found ways of accessing your class hall here and kept that system alive, because I think the class halls are now going to be a pretty much dead area, and that's a shame because some of them are really good. I'm sure some of you will disagree. It's like, fuck no, I don't want to do that warlock run around anymore. I'm tired of it. I get where you're coming from, but compared to having nothing, maybe you will miss it a little bit, is all I'm saying. And they could have reused the class halls. There was no reason not to, if not modify them a little bit to make them more convenient for some of those who didn't like them. So the war campaign kind of runs its course very quickly. The other purpose of it is to unlock the mythic-only dungeons. So you can kind of look at the merging of Suramar, but without having an entire zone story to play out. Obviously, this is done basically from your little starting point in your zone. That's where you'll do your follower missions, that's where your board is, and then you'll get a quest to go and actually do some gameplay. Not a lot. I don't want anybody to expect a lengthy campaign here. That's not going to happen. You're going to do a little bit of gameplay, and that's it. You're just going to be sent off onto basically a scenarioed area, do your quest, and then you'll be back on your boat, as it is for the Horde, rather quickly, and then going and unlocking outposts. That's the idea of it, gaining the foothold. Will they expand on it later in the expansion? Yes. Will they do it in a good way? I hope so. Right now, it's a little like, oh, this bit's cool, and then it's like, okay, so it's just follower missions now. But I'm sure some of you feel that way about class halls, so that's not a big deal. Let's finish up on gameplay here. How are the classes feeling? Because I've been very outspoken about the global cooldown change, and of course a number of how the classes, all the universally across the board, how the classes feel without the AP, without the Legos, the artifact weapon, and all that kind of stuff. I've been very outspoken about that stuff. How is it feeling now? Now we're a couple months out. Better. It is feeling better. There's no denying it. Removing racials and trinkets and bloodlust off the global cooldown was a really good step. Not only that, they kind of merged, or I assume they didn't want to. It's hard to tell because Blizzard's been so secretive about BfA. They kind of relented on the idea that if you want the global cooldown or stacking cooldowns to be a problem, if that's what your issue is people stacking up cooldowns all the time, just reduce the amount of cooldowns people have. And they've done that as well. They've done both. So the global cooldown change is nowhere near as bad as it was. It really isn't. Mainly because in some parts, people have gravitated towards classes that have less cooldowns, and in doing so, Blizzard has changed the other classes to not have cooldowns, as many cooldowns, so the global cooldown change is nowhere near as apparent as it was. A good example would be the Fury Warrior. Recently, the Fury Warrior went under the knife. It went into surgery and had some drastic changes to it, and it was very cool. We did some testing on it. We ran several dungeons with it. We were trying it out. But if you chose a talent setup that had several cooldowns, which has been the big problem of Fury Warriors since the global cooldown change was announced, in this case, it was if you had Recklessness, Avatar, and Bloodbath, it was the global cooldown change really reared its ugly head. And it was like, oh yeah, don't forget I'm still here. And I am very much still here, as it made the class almost annoyingly unplayable, at least for me. And everybody has a different opinion on this, but for me, it's like, this is not fun at all. It's to spend like 4.5 seconds just whacking up cooldowns in order to actually start playing the game. That's not fun at all. And Blizzard responded in kind very quickly, and they're like, okay, yeah, this doesn't work. We know this feels horrible. We're going to change this back. So what they've done is removed two of those cooldowns, because it doesn't make sense in this global cooldown world to play that way. It absolutely does not make sense. So what I could say is, overall gameplay, is the global cooldown a major factor now? No. Does it suck? Yes, it absolutely still sucks compared to what we have in Legion. The big changes, though, are the classes that are relatively unchanged, which are most of them. They will feel worse than they do in Legion, because you're losing all this stuff, right? There's no getting away from it. And even those things that people considered mandatory for the class that have kind of been put back in as talents, they've still had to remove something to make space from that. So whichever way you look at it, you've lost something compared to Legion, and the classes aren't as fun overall as they are in Legion, in my opinion. The classes that have been revamped, though, those are the ones that are going to be the shining stars, because of course we're not comparing them to anything that's in Legion. So your Demonology Warlock and the new Fury Warrior, Survival Hunter, those specs that have been revamped are absolutely the shining stars right now in terms of player feedback. Mainly, and I think a big part of this is, one, they've done a good job, right? The classes are pretty fun. Survival's okay. I'm not a huge fan of it. Demonology is very, very fun, right? And the new revamped Affliction is actually much more interesting as far as I'm concerned. But there are also ones that we can't go, well, I'm used to playing this with a fully loaded artifact weapon and 2 legendary items that are giving me really good bonus effects. And those are some great ways of getting feedback. Positive feedback is no one can compare it to anything. If you'd played the BfA Demonology with, say, 2 really good legendaries and an AP weapon, maybe you would have been thinking differently. But that's not the case, and therefore those specs are coming out like shining stars right now. I would say overall, I think the gameplay is a little worse, but not by a huge margin. It's not by a huge margin. It's not. I have to be honest with myself here, despite the memes and things. It's not. It's not by a huge margin. It's fully working. It's playable. Some classes got worse off than others. But generally speaking, if you like something in Legion and you want to stick to it, chances are it's not changed that much. It might be slightly worse. and whether or not the raid, as that becomes more accessible, Azurite armor makes it even better, then that's up for you. I just want to finish up on the raiding and say Uldir is, I've tested all of Uldir. There's one more mythic boss to test, which is tonight. But other than that, for an opening raid, seems fine. Seems fine. It's got several great bosses, I mean really good ones, and a few downers. But without spoiling it, because I know if you don't know which bosses I'm already talking about, chances are you've avoided spoilers on my channel for what the raids look like. So I'll just say it's got some good bosses, some weak ones, kind of standard opening raid tier, some nice accessibility early on. So there you go, guys. With 2.5 months out, let's see what else they've got for us. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.